Our message this morning is called Freedom's Spiritual Meaning. We're going to begin with a reading which comes from Ernest Holmes. I'm going to invite Mark and Bibi and Wayne to come forward. They're going to help with this reading. If you bring your papers with you, and Mark is first, Bibi second, and Wayne third in reading. And they're going to be reading this morning from something that Ernest Holmes wrote called This Thing Called Life, Spiritual Armament. And it was written by Ernest Holmes and then given as a talk on August of 1950. And when I found it, I just knew, I've had it for months here just sitting on my desk, because I just knew that I wanted this to be a part of what we shared today on the 4th of July, because it's very applicable today, and it was applicable in 1950. And I would venture to guess that everyone here is on this journey, this journey through life, journey of life, to explore how to show up as perfect peace, perfect love, freedom, and find the balance in that between your own needs, your own desires, and everyone else in the world. And so let us listen as we hear something that was read, that would be 70 years ago, 71 years ago, and look for the similarities for how the truths are still showing up for us today. You're up.
All our leaders in this and other countries have asked that we pray for peace in the world, for everyone realizes that we are in a period of great crisis. A crisis that many people feel can mark the beginning of a new and a united effort towards world peace. The over-pessimistic are afraid this crisis might lead to complete world devastation. But people with hope and faith should not feel this way. Rather, we should feel this crisis can lead to something permanent and good, something which will make the world a better place to live in, bringing individual and collective safety, personal liberty, and freedom and justice for all. It is my belief that the greatest responsibility that ever came to one nation, and with it the greatest opportunity, has come to our country, which, united with other democracies, is, in a certain sense, making a united and perhaps a last effort to preserve those values which are dear to all freedom-loving people throughout the world. And as we arm for this conflict, we have the inward assurance that right is on our side, and we should clear our minds of all confusion about this, for there is not now, and never has been, any political or economic system that can equal democracy. It is democracy we are fighting for, a democracy which alone can give freedom to the world and make possible the realization of the great hope of humanity. In this effort, we should all unite. There is no sacrifice too great to make for it, and indeed, such sacrifices as we think we are called on to make should not be considered in the light of sacrifice at all, but rather in the light of the opportunity placed before each one of us to join in this great aspiration. Freedom is something that is won with difficulty and kept only through eternal vigilance. And what does freedom really mean as it works out through the only instruments that can maintain its purpose? The instruments of government, conceived in the idea that all people are equal before God, that every man is an individual in his own right, and that each person should have the privilege of self-expression provided his desires do not infringe on the rights of others. Democracy is a great cooperative enterprise through which this is made possible.
second paragraph's title here is Peace with Justice. And Ernest Holmes says unity does not mean uniformity. Unity means a oneness of purpose. Unity means what is best and safe excuse me, for the majority without losing sight of each member of that majority and each location in it. This is the system upon which our country has grown and prospered, and no doubt there are many defects in it because, after all, we are all human beings. But it is infinitely stronger than it is weak, and upon its preservation rests the hope of the world. Amidst the present-day confusion, we should not lose sight of another great and wonderful thing that is happening. That which was born in faith must be kept in faith. As never before, our thoughts, our meditations, our hopes, and our prayers must rise in one common accord. And you and I should form the habit of taking a definite time each day to pray with justice, for there is no possible peace without it. We should take time each day to pray, to know, and to meditate on the thought, and to meditate affirmatively with complete acceptance that our leaders everywhere are being guided by the all-sustaining wisdom and upheld by the all-sustaining power of good. We should pray for peace of our own minds that shall not be confused, but faith without works is dead. We should not only pray, we should act, each contributing the best he has to the common purpose, each willing to make any sacrifice necessary, not a sacrifice reluctantly that he has to give for two great purposes. One, in certain sense, a selfish one, where we all desire self-preservation, but the other in the greater sense that there can be no individual separation without the preservation of all.
Final chapter is on the side of right. If the whole nation works together and prays together, a great moral and spiritual power, an actual soul force, will penetrate the whole world, helping to bring confidence and calm judgment and right action until the crisis shall have passed. Freedom need never be ashamed of itself, nor liberty bow to despair. God is always on the side of the right, and faith will always conquer fear. We cannot doubt but that the great mass of humanity in every nation must desire peace. We wish to bring peace and justice to all, and in our prayers we should know that this idea is being received and accepted. I believe there is a silent communion of mind with mind, and that every one of us has ample enough evidence in this fact in his everyday life. Through these ideas, the thoughts and ideas are contagious. Why shouldn't there be a true propaganda, a spiritual propaganda? And if your thoughts and mind reach each other, as they most certainly do, why shouldn't our united thoughts penetrate every location on earth with a feeling of goodwill to the humble citizens of every country? I am sure they can. There seems to be two attitudes we can assume. One is calmness, faith, and conviction. The other, despair. And despair is unthinkable. Let then, each in his own way, dedicate his time, his service, his hope, and his spiritual conviction to the common cause of liberty and justice for all. And let's work without tiring and pray without ceasing. We know something alive with meaning is taking place. Something vibrant with hope is happening. Something latent with a possibility of the future is being conceived. The destiny of the world is at stake, and this includes your world and my world. The world cannot exist half enslaved and half free. The decision is being made now. These are indeed times that try our souls, but it is written that they who dwell in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty.
Wow, thank you. Thank you, each one of you. That was wonderful.
Do we actually take advantage of all the freedoms that we have? I know I've asked that question several times in the past when we've talked about freedom, but do we? And we recognize the value of those freedoms, the extreme value, because a lot of people do not get to experience those same freedoms that we do. And so we have a great opportunity, and are we taking advantage of that opportunity? It's something you need to ask ourselves. Some wonderful words here spoken by Ernest Holmes and relayed beautifully. Thank you very much. And makes us really think about the value, not only to ourselves, but to us as a country, in terms of the unified consciousness. I read this week, I believe it was on Facebook, so that's where I get most of my valuable information.
Right.
They say without freedom of speech, we would not know who the idiots are. Okay, it's kind of rather sarcastic value of liberty. But I think it's really valuable for us to contemplate on that for a little bit. And we've seen a lot of stuff going around in terms of unified thought ideas going around in our nation in the last couple of years that are maybe not very positive or are not aimed in the right direction, I think. And we're seeing evidence of those thoughts and those ideas being bought into by a large number of people. And they're causing destruction and separation more than unification. That's not what we're here about, and that's not what the American dream is all about. The American dream is many people coming together in a melting pot, many possibilities coming together to form one unified democratic idea. And are we experiencing that? And so therefore I say, as a country, are we really valuing the freedoms that we have? Are we taking advantage of the freedoms that we have to do something negative, or are we doing something positive? It's important for us as individuals to recognize our freedoms and recognize the power that we have to influence others to use those same freedoms in a positive way. And I believe that's what we in Science of Mind are doing in terms of unifying with others in terms of our thoughts and our beliefs. Ernest Holmes said in the writing today, thoughts and ideas are contagious. Thoughts and ideas are contagious. I think that's a powerful statement. He's talking about this thing in Science of Mind we call race consciousness. The idea that we share a consciousness, we share a unified idea, we share unified beliefs with other people around us. I believe that's the meaning of the American dream. The American dream is an idea that we share this idea that anything is possible to us as Americans because of our freedoms. We share that idea. Anything is possible. Positive or negative. It's up to us to decide which we wish, which we wish to express. What we literally hold in thought influences the realm of unified consciousness, therefore becoming a universal truth, a universal idea. We know that thoughts have power. We know through science that that is true. And we know that the fundamental level, everything is energy, and thought is energy, and we can actually influence that energy through our thoughts. And so therefore, the more we put into that universal energy field through our thoughts, the more we build a entity, an idea, a model that will attract other ideas that are similar to that until it reaches a critical mass point in which it manifests and becomes something that we can experience in our physical form. That's something that we teach in Science of Mind. That's something that quantum physics tells us about too. So it's not something that is just a woo-woo idea. It's a scientific fact. So the thoughts that we hold will determine the extent to which it materializes, manifests in our lives, in our individual lives, and then expanding on into universal reality. Ernest Holmes said, silent communion of mind with mind. That was a beautiful statement. It's a silent communion of mind with mind. The American dream is something that we hold in our thoughts. A dream is not something that we see around us necessarily, but it's an idea that we hold within the recesses of our mind, our individual mind. But when we have a silent communion of mind to mind, or mind with mind, we're talking about a silent truth that I hold, that Deborah holds, that each one of you hold, and in a community we hold those ideas together. And because it's a silent communion, it connects, and so therefore it expands, and therefore it grows, and therefore it becomes manifest in our lives. Unified prayer is unified consciousness, and I could say that unified consciousness is unified prayer. So whatever we hold common between ourselves in terms of beliefs and ideas are universal ideas. They're community ideas. And so therefore it passes beyond just me. We need to be careful and vigilant about our predominant thought patterns, therefore. We need to be careful about what we're putting into the cosmic energy. As we're putting negative energy in, we're creating separation and negativity. As we're thinking positive thoughts about anything is possible. We are American, therefore we have freedoms, we have rights, and therefore we have the power to create a world that we wish to experience and to live in. We have the power to create the environment in which we wish to live. That's part of our God-given rights and our American rights. That's a freedom that we have. We cannot afford the luxury of a negative thought. I love that phrase. We cannot afford the luxury of negative thought because we're just putting negativity into the universal works. We don't want to litter the goodness that we have with negative ideas because we're going to trip over those things ourselves. So therefore we clean it up, we think positively, we hold the American dream as an absolute truth within our minds and know that as we do so, we create a world that works better for everyone.
Wow, that was powerful.
Thank you.
Love it. So I want to talk about a couple of things here. The first one being an idea that comes from Science of Mind teachings, and we have the 10 core concepts. We don't very often talk about the 10 core concepts. There's a whole class about the 10 concepts. We don't very often talk specifically about them. I guess maybe because we talk about the we believe statements a lot more. But core concept number 8 is called the eternal now. And so I would invite us to open up to that idea of the eternal now, because the eternal now is the state of freedom. It is the idea of knowing the perfect experience, perfect mind, perfect life in your life and all life in this moment, which is the eternal moment. And in that, we find our freedom. I would be so bold as to say that the way to experience freedom for ourselves within in truth principles is to know our oneness. When we know our oneness with all life, something is set free within us. And we are not holding on to things. We are not holding on, period. In Science of Mind textbook, Ernest Holmes defines freedom, and I venture a guess that he defines it in many different ways throughout his lifetime. And there are a lot of, it's quite a large paragraph here, so I'm going to share some of the highlights. Freedom means that man is created in the image of perfection and let alone and allowed to make the discovery for himself or herself. Created in the image of perfection, let alone. That's part of our freedom. We are already perfect, and any idea of bondage that we take on, we have only taken on through our own mind. We can shift that through our own thoughts. He says freedom of will means to do, say, and think as you wish. Express life as you personally desire. And once again, that is our freedom and a part of what is in our democracy, to be able to say, do, think whatever we desire. I'm especially keen on the think idea because there is no one in the entire world who can make us think a certain thing. And so I consider that a bondage when we believe that not to be true, when we believe that because someone else did something, we have to think this way. There are no have-tos. Do you want to? Does it feel right and good? Does it align with love and peace? Is it going to serve you and everyone else? And I bold printed this one. As you realize your oneness with creative mind, you become released from bondage of false thinking. So because we are heir to all possibilities, we are free to think whatever we would like to think. And as our beautiful Carol so much loves to say, and I think a lot of us have taken it on, how's that working for you? So anywhere that you notice something that isn't working in your life, you have the power to shift it. Why? Because you are of the divine, made in the likeness and image of all that is. So if you don't like that thought that you are experiencing, if you don't like the manifestation of that thought, we have the freedom in every given moment to shift that thought. And I invite you to think about how that's real in minor ways in your life. I know that for me, one thing that I definitely don't like is having shots. And so when I go to get a shot, I used to run away. I used to run right out of the doctor's office when I was a child. As soon as they'd let loose enough, I'd tear away. And do you remember when we'd have shots in school? And the whole class would line up and you'd wait your turn. Well, I was really lucky. My mom was a teacher. And so when we'd line up, I'd wait till there was nobody looking and I would run into her classroom. I was more afraid of the shot than I was the embarrassment of looking like a fool to my whole class and her class. I was more afraid of that shot. So at some point in my adult life, I decided that if I sit there and think about the shot and the pain and the possibilities of something going into my body, I am creating that negative paranoia. But if I sit there and think about something else and breathe and relax, sometimes I notice I do not even feel it. They'll say, a little pinch. No, it isn't. It's really next to nothing. I hurt my own self worse with my fingernails when I scratch myself. So that's a minor way. But you see, what we know is that whatever is true in one instance must be truth in all instances. So whatever it is that shows up as a fear, as a concern, as a negative, we have the power to shift. Whatever shows up as a lack or a limitation or a bondage, we have the power to shift. We have a wonderful saying in Science of Mind. When the three were reading, Bibi was talking about prayer. And I love this thought. Sometimes we call prayer treatment, spiritual mind treatment, and it's treat and move your feet, which means to pray and to take action along with those prayers. And I think I am to the bottom. The one thing that did come up in the reading that I did want to just address briefly was the idea of spiritual propaganda. I actually looked up propaganda because I thought that that word was in the negative. And maybe you do too, maybe you don't. But when I looked it up, it said that it's thoughts and ideas. It's thoughts and ideas, propaganda. And then what happens is that sometimes the thoughts and ideas that are shared are not accurate. They're not of truth, even if they appear factual to some people. And so I came up with my own word, as I love to do, instead of propaganda, I came up with a prototype. And God is our spiritual prototype. So if, as we enjoy freedom's spiritual meaning, we can use this idea of God as all that is, as our spiritual prototype, so that the words that we speak, the actions that we take, and the thoughts that we think align with the highest and best of us. And so happy 4th of July to each one of you.